The old man's face lost color the second he saw Clara standing outside the mansion. "No," he whispered. His voice was barely audible, almost lost beneath the sound of rain tapping against black luxury vehicles lined across the driveway. "Please tell me he didn't do that." The security guards looked at each other, confused. The chauffeurs froze. Even the men standing beside the Rolls-Royce slowly turned toward the mansion entrance, because they had never seen Arthur Sterling react like this. Not once. Not in business meetings. Not during billion-dollar negotiations. Not during market crashes. Not during economic disasters. Never. And that was the strange thing about truly powerful people. Real power rarely panics. Real power stays calm. So when calm people suddenly become afraid, everyone notices. Across the driveway stood Ethan Vance. And Ethan Vance was smiling. Not because he understood what was happening, because 10 seconds earlier, he had just done something he believed would improve his life. Something he believed would finally elevate his status. Something he believed would remove the one person who no longer fit the image of success he had created around himself. He had thrown his wife out. Hours earlier, Ethan thought he was celebrating the greatest night of his career. At 39 years old, Ethan Vance had become one of the country's most admired entrepreneurs. Magazine covers called him visionary. Business podcasts called him revolutionary. Financial channels called him self-made. And Ethan loved that word. Self-made. Because self-made sounded powerful. It sounded clean. One man. One dream. One empire. Simple. Except success is almost never simple. And people who constantly hear applause slowly develop dangerous blind spots. Psychologists call one of those blind spots overconfidence bias. The tendency to believe success in one area automatically creates expertise in every area. Ethan suffered from it badly. The irony: people experiencing it rarely know they have it, because confidence feels exactly like competence. At least in the beginning. Earlier that evening, Ethan stood on the rooftop of Vance Tower overlooking the city. Hundreds of guests surrounded him. Executives, politicians, investors, celebrities. The skyline stretched endlessly beneath. Warm golden light while giant screens displayed one message. Vance Industries acquires Northridge Global. Champagne glasses clinked. Music played. Camera flashes exploded every few seconds. Everyone smiled. Everyone congratulated him. Everyone repeated the same thing. Genius. Incredible. Self-made. Every compliment felt like fuel. And Ethan absorbed all of it. Because praise becomes addictive when people hear it long enough. His assistant approached carefully. "Sir." Ethan looked up. "Your wife just arrived." Immediately his smile weakened. Not completely. Just enough. Because recently Ethan had developed a strange feeling whenever Clara entered rooms full of wealthy people. Embarrassment. Not because Clara behaved badly. Not because she lacked intelligence. Not because she created problems. Because Clara looked simple. Painfully simple. The elevator doors opened, and there she stood. Simple beige coat. Hair tied back. No diamonds. No expensive jewelry. No designer handbag. No celebrity appearance. Nothing about her looked like the wife of a billionaire CEO. She smiled immediately after seeing him. A real smile. Warm. Natural. The kind of smile people have before realizing someone changed. "Hey!" Ethan stared. Then looked down. Reusable grocery bag. Silence. Absolute silence. Nearby investors quietly looked away. Executives suddenly became interested in their phones. Because discomfort had entered the air instantly. Clara reached inside the bag. "You forgot your medicine." She smiled. "I figured you'd need it." Silence. Ethan stared at the medicine bottle, then stared at the bag, then stared at Clara. Medicine. At a billion-dollar celebration. Inside a grocery bag. For reasons he couldn't explain. Something inside him tightened. Not anger. Something uglier. Shame. But not personal shame. Social shame. The fear of being judged. The fear of looking small beside people with influence. And comparison creates dangerous things. Comparison slowly transforms gratitude into dissatisfaction. Then dissatisfaction becomes resentment. Then resentment becomes cruelty. Ethan looked around. Huge mistake. Audience. always audience. People with ego become performers, and performers need spectators. What are you wearing? Silence. Clara blinked. What? Ethan forced a smile. You couldn't dress differently. Silence. Nearby executives shifted uncomfortably. I came quickly. He laughed, quietly. Disappointed. Almost disgusted. Clara lowered her hands slowly. Something changed in her expression. Very small. Very subtle. But enough. The smile disappeared. Not fully. Just slightly. And somehow that hurt more, because fake smiles disappear instantly. Real smiles fade slowly. And slow disappointment feels heavier. Ethan looked toward executives beside him. You know something funny? Nobody answered, but Ethan continued. Because ego loves microphones. People think building empires is difficult. Silence. It really isn't. A few executives exchanged looks. Ethan raised one finger. Control debt. Another. Acquire competitors. Another. Own infrastructure. Then he smiled. And eventually, pause. You own everything. Silence. Clara looked at him. Long. Then quietly asked. Own. Ethan frowned. Yes. She tilted her head. Or control. Tiny question. Massive difference. Because ownership and control are rarely identical. Corporate law hides invisible architecture ordinary people never see. Trust structures. Shell corporations. Parent entities. Silent investors. Layers beneath layers beneath layers. Sometimes CEOs run companies. Sometimes companies run CEOs. Sometimes ownership sits completely invisible. Clara knew that. Ethan thought he knew that. Huge difference. People often confuse exposure with expertise. Psychologists call it the Dunning-Kruger effect. The less people know, the easier certainty becomes. Ethan smiled. You wouldn't understand. Silence. No shouting. No insults. No anger. Just dismissal. And dismissal often hurts more than cruelty. Because cruelty acknowledges presence. Dismissal erases value. Clara looked down briefly, then handed him the medicine. He accepted it mechanically, not because he cared. Because cameras still existed. Image mattered. Everything mattered, except people. Hours later, Ethan stood inside their mansion staring toward giant rain-covered windows. Thunder rolled outside. Water raced down glass. The house felt strangely cold. Clara entered quietly. Ethan. No response. She walked closer. What's wrong? Silence. Long silence. Then Ethan laughed. And immediately Clara became still. Because empty laughter feels different. Cold. Detached. Dangerous. You contribute nothing. Silence. Complete silence. Clara blinked. What? You heard me. Thunder exploded outside. You contribute absolutely nothing. Years together. Years married. Years supporting him. Reduced to one sentence. Clara stared. No anger. No shouting. No tears. Just shock. Actual shock. Ethan walked slowly across the room. My empire. Silence. My success. Pause. My company. Then directly toward her. And what exactly did you build? Nothing. No answer. Then quietly. Ethan. No. He raised his hand. No speeches. No explanations. No discussion. Then he reached toward the table. Documents. Divorce papers. Clara froze. Actually froze. What? Sign. Silence. Rain crashed outside. Thunder followed immediately. For several seconds Clara simply stared. No movement. No breathing. No words. Then quietly. You're serious. Ethan smiled. Coldly. Very. Long silence. Very long silence. Then Clara looked directly into his eyes. One question. Just one. Are you absolutely sure? And Ethan Vance smiled. Because powerful people become most blind seconds before consequences arrive. Completely unaware. 3 black SUVs had already turned into the driveway, and his empire was 10 seconds away from beginning its collapse. The first black SUV rolled through the gates so slowly it almost looked deliberate. Not cautious. Deliberate. Like whoever sat inside already knew speed was unnecessary, because powerful people never rushed. Rainwater reflected headlights across the marble driveway while Ethan stood near the mansion entrance, with his hand still, resting on the divorce papers. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Clara looked toward the gates. Ethan frowned. Then another SUV entered. Then another. Then a black Rolls-Royce. Behind them came a red Ferrari. Then a white Lamborghini. Silence. Absolute silence. The kind of silence that arrives before people realize reality is changing. Ethan stared. What is this? No answer. Rain continued falling. Security guards near the mansion exchanged confused looks. Because these vehicles had bypassed the external gate authorization system. That wasn't supposed to happen. Nobody entered without approval. Nobody. Not investors. Not politicians. Not celebrities. Not even Ethan's executive board. So why had the gates opened automatically? One guard touched his earpiece. Another looked toward the security station. Confusion spread instantly. Then something stranger happened. Neither guard moved. Because before either man could react, the men exiting the SUVs made one thing obvious. These weren't ordinary security teams. Dark suits, perfect posture, earpieces, disciplined movements, no wasted motion, no panic, no noise. And somehow that frightened people more, because loud people often perform power. Quiet people usually possess it. Ethan stepped forward. Who authorized this? No response. One bodyguard opened the rear door of the Rolls-Royce, and suddenly everything changed. An older man slowly stepped outside. Grey hair, dark tailored coat, elegant umbrella held over his shoulder. No jewelry, no visible attempt to impress anyone, but presence. Presence cannot be purchased, and this man carried enough presence to silence entire rooms. Ethan stared. Confusion slowly moved across his face, because he recognized him. Not personally, not exactly, but from somewhere. Business magazines, financial interviews, board photographs, economic conferences. Then suddenly, memory hit him. Arthur Sterling, founder of Sterling Global Trust, one of the wealthiest and most private financial figures in the country. A man so influential even billionaires treated him carefully. A man famous for avoiding cameras. Famous for silence. Famous for building ownership structures nobody fully understood. And strangely, Arthur Sterling looked terrified, not nervous, not surprised. Terrified. He stared directly toward Clara, then toward the suitcase, then toward Ethan, then back toward Clara. And all color disappeared from his face. No. The word escaped quietly, almost accidentally. Then he started walking, fast. Much faster than anyone expected. Security followed instantly. Ethan frowned. Confusion became irritation. Irritation became anger. Because Arthur Sterling wasn't walking toward him. Not toward the mansion. Not toward the luxury cars. Toward Clara. Straight toward Clara. And suddenly, Ethan felt something uncomfortable move through his chest. Very small. Very unfamiliar. Unease. Because human intuition notices things before logic does. Sometimes people feel danger before understanding it. And Ethan suddenly felt danger. Huge danger. Clara stared. Shock moved across her face too. Real shock. Because apparently she had not expected this either. Arthur finally reached them. Stopped. Looked directly at Clara. Long silence. Then quietly. Clara. No response. Rainwater rolled down the umbrella edge. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Arthur looked at the suitcase. Then the divorce papers. Then toward Ethan. And suddenly, Ethan saw something he had never expected. Disappointment. Real disappointment. Not business disappointment. Not financial disappointment. Personal disappointment. Arthur stared at Ethan for several seconds. Then asked, "Tell me something." Silence. Ethan crossed his arms. Defensive. Psychologists say people unconsciously protect themselves. Physically before emotionally. Karma. Interesting thing about fear. Bodies often recognize it before minds do. Ethan still didn't believe he felt fear, but his body already knew. Arthur spoke slowly, carefully. "Did you throw her out?" Silence. Ethan frowned. "Excuse me." The question itself irritated him, not because of the words, because of the tone. Like Arthur already knew. Like Arthur wasn't asking. Like Arthur was confirming. Ethan forced a smile. "Actually, this is a private matter." Arthur didn't react. Not even slightly. Silence. Ethan straightened his jacket. This situation has nothing to do with you. Still silence. And suddenly Ethan felt strangely uncomfortable. Because powerful people expect reactions. They expect resistance. Arguments. Emotion. But Arthur offered nothing. No anger. No confrontation. No performance. Just silence. And silence creates pressure. Huge pressure. Then Arthur slowly looked toward Clara. Did he know? Silence. Clara lowered her eyes. No response. Arthur asked again. Clara. Long pause. Did he know? Ethan frowned. Know what? What was happening? What conversation was this? Why was nobody explaining anything? Then Clara finally answered. Quietly. No. Arthur closed his eyes. Actually closed his eyes. And suddenly something shifted. Not outside. Inside Ethan. Because Arthur looked heartbroken. Not shocked. Not angry. Heartbroken. And somehow that terrified Ethan more. Because heartbreak suggests loss. Loss suggests value. And value suggests Ethan had misunderstood something important. Very important. Then Arthur whispered. Oh God. Silence. Oh God, he really never knew. Ethan stared. What exactly didn't I know? Nobody answered. Comma. Huge mistake. Because unanswered questions create psychological pressure. People naturally seek cognitive closure. Human brains hate uncertainty. And uncertainty had suddenly surrounded Ethan from every direction. Executives had begun appearing near the entrance now. Staff too. Security. Drivers. Everyone. Because luxury convoys arriving at midnight tend to attract attention, especially when Arthur Sterling exits one. People whispered, very quietly. Then Ethan heard one sentence. Just one. And suddenly his stomach tightened. Wait. Pause. No way. Another whisper. Sterling? Then another. Impossible. Ethan looked around. Nobody met his eyes. Not one person. Very strange. Hours earlier everyone wanted his attention. Hours earlier everyone laughed at his jokes. Hours earlier everyone followed him. Now suddenly, nothing. Then Ethan noticed something terrifying. Executives weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at Clara. And people rarely stare at ordinary people like that. Arthur finally turned toward Ethan. Silence. Long silence. Then calmly, tell me. Pause. How much do you understand about ownership structures? Ethan blinked. What? Arthur looked toward the mansion. Then toward the city skyline. Then back toward Ethan. Trusts. Pause. Holding companies. Pause. Silent ownership. Silence. How much? Ethan frowned. What kind of question was that? He laughed softly. Defensively. I built Vance Industries. No reaction. I understand my own company. Arthur stared. Long. Very long. Then something changed in his face. Not anger. Not frustration. Sadness. Actual sadness. Then quietly. No. Silence. No, you don't. And suddenly, for the first time all night, Ethan Vance felt fear become real. Because Arthur Sterling wasn't looking at him like a rival. He wasn't looking at him like an enemy. He was looking at him like someone standing on train tracks. Completely unaware of what was coming. Ethan Vance felt his heartbeat change. Not faster. Not slower. Stranger. Like his body suddenly understood something his mind refused to accept. Rain continued falling across them. Marble driveway while dozens of eyes remained fixed on Arthur Sterling. And the single document still. Resting in his hands. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The mansion behind Ethan still glowed with warm light, but somehow everything felt colder now. Much colder. Because uncertainty had entered the room, and uncertainty becomes terrifying when powerful people experience it. Moments earlier Ethan still believed he understood his world. His company. His marriage. His future. Now suddenly every person standing around him looked like they knew something he didn't. And ignorance becomes painful when someone builds their entire identity around certainty. Psychologists describe something called cognitive dissonance, the discomfort people feel when reality collides with beliefs they desperately want protecting. Ethan was experiencing it in real time. Part of him wanted answers, another part wanted silence. Because deep down, somewhere very deep down, A small voice had started whispering something terrifying. What if Arthur is telling the truth? No. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Ethan laughed. Not because anything felt funny, because people sometimes laugh when reality becomes too uncomfortable. Small laugh, forced laugh, defensive laugh. What exactly is this supposed to mean? Silence. Arthur looked at him. Long. Very long. No anger. No superiority. No satisfaction. Just disappointment. Real disappointment. And somehow disappointment hurt more, because anger creates enemies. Disappointment creates mirrors. Mirrors force people seeing themselves. Arthur slowly closed the folder. Rainwater rolled softly across black leather shoes while the security teams behind him remained perfectly still. No movement. No whispers. No reactions. Disciplined. Controlled. The strange thing about people around real power, they rarely need performances. Arthur finally spoke. Tell me something. Ethan stared. Silence. When Vans Industries expanded internationally. Pause. Who negotiated your infrastructure financing? Ethan frowned. What? Why ask that? Years earlier. Expansion phase. Huge growth. Massive investments. Meetings. Lawyers. Banks. Financial advisors. Ethan remembered pieces, not details, just outcomes. Because successful people sometimes remember victories while forgetting processes. Huge mistake. Leadership experts warn against this constantly. Outcomes create confidence. Processes create understanding. Confusing the two creates dangerous blind spots. Ethan shrugged. My financial department. Arthur nodded slowly. Names? Silence. Ethan frowned. What names? Long pause. Then. My legal team handled that. Arthur nodded again. Names? Silence. Absolute silence. Because Ethan suddenly realized something embarrassing. He didn't know. Actually didn't know. Not one. Not a single name. And suddenly another psychological principle appeared. The illusion of explanatory depth. People often believe they understand systems until someone asks them. Explaining details. Then suddenly confidence disappears. Ethan felt it instantly. No. No, no, no. This meant nothing. Nothing. Arthur continued. When your company acquired East Harbor Properties. Silence. Who arranged the holding structures? Ethan frowned harder. No answer. When Vance Tower was purchased. Silence. Who structured ownership? Nothing. When private investors entered. Pause. Who negotiated controlling shares? Silence. No answer. No answer again. No answer anywhere, because Ethan suddenly felt memories collapsing. Meetings. Documents. Signatures. Stacks of paper. Lawyers saying things. Advisors explaining things. Clara quietly sitting beside him. Then suddenly, memory hit. Hard. Very hard. Conference room. Years earlier. A lawyer speaking. Trust structures create additional protection. Ethan laughing. Fine. Another memory. Please review ownership percentages. Ethan smiling. Later. Another. Controlling interest should be examined carefully. His answer. I trust my people. Then another. And another. And suddenly, Ethan felt sick. Actually sick. Because he remembered something successful people hear constantly. Read before signing. Understand before agreeing. Never confuse trust with verification. And he ignored all of it. Arthur looked toward Clara, then back toward Ethan. Leadership and ownership are different. Silence. Visibility and control are different. Pause. Building and possessing are different. Long silence. Ethan stared. No. 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 This wasn't happening. Couldn't happen. Because Ethan built Vance Industries. He worked nights. Sacrificed years. Missed birthdays. Lost sleep. Fought competitors. Struggled. Nearly collapsed. He remembered all of it. All of it. Then Clara looked directly into his eyes and softly said, Nobody denied your sacrifices. Silence. You've worked harder than almost anyone I know. Pause. You suffered. Pause. You built. Tears formed. But Ethan. Long silence. You stopped listening. Nothing moved. Not one person, not one sound, because everybody felt the emotional shift. This wasn't becoming financial anymore. This had become personal. Very personal. Ethan stared. Listening? What did that even mean? Then Clara looked down briefly. When she looked back up, her expression had changed. Not sadness. Not anger. Not revenge. Grief. Actual grief. And grief frightened Ethan, because grief suggested something already died. Then quietly, do you remember our apartment? Silence. Tiny apartment. Broken air conditioner. Cheap furniture. Takeout boxes. Late night coffee. Long conversations. Dreams. Hope. Ethan remembered instantly. Of course he remembered. Then Clara smiled weakly. Back then. Pause. You used to ask questions. Silence. You asked everyone questions. Pause. You listened. Long pause. You wanted understanding. Nothing. No movement. Then. And slowly. Her voice cracked. Success changed that. Silence. Ethan looked away. Because memory had become painful now. Very painful. Clara continued. You stopped asking. Pause. You started assuming. Pause. You stopped listening. Then tears rolled down her face. And eventually, long silence. You stopped seeing people. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because everyone standing there suddenly realized this conversation wasn't about wealth, or ownership, or business. It was about character. Arthur slowly opened the folder again, carefully. Then removed one final document. One page. Just one. But instantly Ethan recognized it. Corporate seal. Official signatures. Investment authorization. And suddenly, his face lost color. Because he remembered this paper. Years earlier. Company expansion. $1 billion restructuring. He signed without reading. Signed while laughing. Signed while answering phone calls. Signed while talking business. Signed while assuming. Arthur looked directly into his eyes. Long silence. Very long silence. Then quietly. Ethan. Pause. Do you know whose signature gave Sterling Global Trust controlling ownership? Silence. No breathing. No movement. Nothing. Arthur slowly turned the page. Toward Ethan. Toward everyone. Toward reality. And Ethan felt his entire world stop. Because beside the controlling agreement, beside the ownership authorization, beside the signature line, was one name. Clara Sterling. And suddenly Ethan realized the empire he spent years calling his had never really belonged to him at all. Ethan Vance felt the world become quiet. Not physically. The rain still fell. Luxury engines still hummed softly in the driveway. People still stood around him, but inside his mind, everything stopped. Because written directly beneath the ownership agreement, written beneath legal authorization signatures, written beside the controlling share structure, was a name? Clara Sterling. Not Clara Vance. Not Clara Ethan knew. Clara Sterling. And suddenly 1,000 forgotten moments crashed into him at once. Questions. Conversations. Documents. Warnings. Late-night talks. Tiny details he dismissed for years. Tiny details he ignored because arrogance had convinced him he already understood everything. Psychologists describe something called confirmation bias. People naturally seek information supporting beliefs they already hold. Everything else? They ignore it, reject it, minimize it. Ethan had spent years doing exactly that, because believing he built everything alone felt good. Believing he controlled everything felt powerful. Believing he owned everything felt safe. And now reality had arrived with legal signatures. Reality always wins. Always. No matter how successful someone becomes, no matter how rich someone becomes, reality waits, patiently, then eventually introduces itself. Ethan stared at the paper. Again. Then again. Then again. No. 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 This couldn't happen. Not possible. Because Vance Industries was his life, his sacrifices, his work, his struggle. He remembered sleepless nights, business failures, debt, stress, anxiety, years fighting for survival. He remembered all of it. Then suddenly, another memory appeared. Small. Very small. But devastating. Tiny apartment. Years earlier. 2 cups of cheap coffee, stacks of business papers. Ethan frustrated, exhausted, ready to quit, and Clara sitting beside him, smiling, quietly reading documents, then asking, "Did you read page 17? Back then, Ethan laughed. "No." She smiled. "You should." He remembered laughing again. "I trust you." Trust. Strange word, because trust creates comfort. But comfort sometimes creates blindness. Huge blindness. And suddenly Ethan realized something painful. He trusted Clara emotionally, but never respected her intellectually. Never. Not really, because somewhere during success, he quietly decided he understood more, knew more, became more, and power creates dangerous illusions, especially when applause never stops. Silence covered the driveway. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Arthur Sterling looked at Ethan quietly, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just sadness. Real sadness. Because Arthur understood something Ethan only now started learning. Money problems can be fixed. Business problems can be fixed. Character problems become much harder. Long silence. Then Ethan looked toward Clara. Actually looked. Not at her clothes. Not at her appearance. Not at the suitcase. At her. For the first time in years. And suddenly, details hurt. The exhaustion in her eyes. The sadness. The disappointment. Not anger. Not hatred. Disappointment. Because disappointment usually appears after hope dies. Then Clara quietly spoke. "Ethan." Silence. No response. "Ethan." Again. Slowly he looked up. Tears had already started forming. Not because of ownership. Not because of money. Not because of the company. Because memory had started attacking him. One memory after another. Clara waiting late at night. Clara bringing food during meetings. Clara sitting beside him during difficult years. Clara supporting him when nobody else believed. Clara defending him. Clara encouraging him. Clara staying. Always staying. And suddenly Ethan realized something terrifying. Success didn't change Clara. Success changed him. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Slowly. Small choices. Small arrogance. Small moments. Tiny dismissals. Until eventually he became someone earlier Ethan wouldn't recognize. People rarely become terrible overnight. People drift. And drifting becomes dangerous. Because people almost never notice movement while it's happening. Then Clara asked quietly, "Do you remember our promise?" Silence. Ethan stared. Promise? Then memory hit instantly. Small apartment. Broken heater. Winter nights. Cheap takeout. Clara smiling. Then asking, "If we become successful someday?" Pause. "Promise me success won't change us." Ethan remembered laughing, smiling, holding her hand. Promise. 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 And suddenly Ethan couldn't breathe, because he broke it. Completely. Years ago. Long before tonight. Long before divorce papers. Long before the mansion. Long before status. He broke it quietly. One decision at a time. One ego-driven moment at a time. Then suddenly, Ethan dropped. Not dramatically. Not intentionally. His knees simply gave up. Marble floor. Cold rain. Silence. Complete silence. Executives stared. Security stared. Employees stared. Nobody moved. Because powerful people falling feels shocking, especially emotionally. Ethan looked toward Clara. Tears finally fell completely. Real tears. Not performative. Not controlled. I didn't see it. Silence. His voice cracked. Actually cracked. I didn't see myself changing. No response. More tears. I thought success meant becoming more. Pause. Long pause. Then. But somewhere, his voice shook. I became less. Absolute silence. Because honesty becomes painful when people finally stop protecting themselves. Then Ethan looked down. Couldn't even hold eye contact. Because shame finally arrived. Real shame, not embarrassment. Shame. And shame feels different. Embarrassment fears judgment. Shame fears truth. Long silence. Then Clara slowly walked closer, very slowly. Stopped directly in front of him. Ethan looked up. Hope. Fear. Regret. Everything together. Then Clara spoke. Softly. Quietly. but every word landed hard. Money never changed you. Silence. Power revealed you. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because everyone understood. Power doesn't create character. Power exposes character. Long silence. Then Clara wiped tears from her face, and I spent years hoping the man I married was still there. Pause. Long pause. But I couldn't find him anymore. Nothing moved. Not rain. Not people. Nothing. Because some sentences feel heavier than shouting. Arthur looked away quietly. Even he looked emotional now, because growth often arrives painfully. Very painfully. Months later, Ethan stepped away from Vance Industries. Leadership counseling. Therapy. Silence. No interviews. No magazines. No cameras. For the first time in years, no applause. Because applause had become noise. And noise had almost destroyed him. Years later, Ethan would speak at leadership conferences. Not about wealth. Not about business. Not about success. Instead, he always repeated one sentence. Read contracts carefully. Pause. Then smile slightly. But read people even more carefully. Because ownership built his empire. But humility rebuilt his life. And Ethan Vance finally learned something success never taught him. The most valuable things people own are usually the things money never bought.